Hello and welcome to AXSChat. This week we're delighted to be joined by Jonathan Attenborough, who's a regular on AXSChat, but he's also a disability campaigner and an ambassador for both Ewan's Guide and for Animal Style. So welcome, Jonathan. It's great to have you with us. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're up to right now and how you came to be involved in the space?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm a disability campaigner, activist, and ambassador for Ewan's Guide and the Animal Star Awards. I've been sort of campaigning on disability issues all my life. Obviously, I was born blind, so access and making adjustments for accessibility has been something that's been really important to me throughout my whole life. And in my area in particular, there's not a lot of people who advocate for access and accessibility. So I've kind of taken it upon myself. Probably, I would say this year, definitely a lot more. I've been a lot more active this year than I have been any other year. Particularly, I ran a campaign through the summer about shared streets that um, I came across. Shared streets for people who don't know is where they've levelled off the curbs and the pavements so that it's all one flat surfaces for people and cars to share. And obviously that causes problems for many people with disabilities and also drivers who are quite confused by the area. So I ran a campaign against one that my local council had installed, and it was quite a successful campaign in the end. After a bit of back and forth, with my campaign, and it kind of changed the council policy that they would take accessibility into account from the very beginning and sort of any sort of inclusion needs from the beginning, and they made that their policy from as a result of my campaign. And I've been involved in Ewan's Guide as well this year. I became an ambassador for them, which promote disabled access reviews. So anybody who has any sort of access requirements can go on to Ewan's Guide and search what venue they like to go and see if there's any reviews up there other disabled people have left, so that they can know in advance what the access is going to be like. So it's something I'm very passionate about, and it's something I believe.
And absolutely, I understand the value of something like Ewan's Guide in helping remove the anxiety. It's something that our mutual friend
Definitely.
Gavin Neat talks about, in terms of arrival anxiety, but also in terms of even before you get to arrive, the whole idea of being able to plan and understand whether or not it's
Yeah.
somewhere that you are able to go without causing yourself undue difficulty and distress. Deborah, I know you had a question.
Yeah, I I appreciate I appreciate you being so active on Access Chat too, Jonathan. So welcome to the
No, no, it's
program.
all, I love it.
Uh,
I love it.
yeah, you're an important community member, so
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate you. I'm curious if this work that you're doing is paid. If some of it's paid, if it's all of it's paid, and let me tell you why I'm asking you that. I'm asking you that because I often see when it comes to disability inclusion and efforts that we're making to advocate for our community, it's often expected to be done for free. And as a
Yeah.
consultant, I I'm just sort of tired of, that happening. I believe that we add a lot of value to these, organizations, corporations, people that we're really trying to help. We're trying to drive more business to them. And so I'm just hoping that you'll say, of course, I'm always paid, Deborah. Why would you pay me to come in and help you be an expert and an ambassador and not pay me? But I often see it not being paid, so I was just curious.
Yeah, no, and that's an excellent point. So the work that I do off my own back, the campaigning stuff is obviously not paid because that's me taking forward, issues that I care about and raising them directly with people. So the campaigning side of things that isn't paid, but I have this year been paid for sort of consultancy work that I've done with
Good. Good.
some corporates to make their own companies accessible. So I do a lot around digital accessibility as well, which I am pleased to say that I'm paid for. And I make a point of, when I reach out, well, when people reach out to me, I say, I'm quite happy to carry out this work for you, but I'm not doing it for free, because
Yeah.
I think that people don't value what they're not paying for. So I think if they are having to pay for consultancy or any advice around accessibility, I think definitely they should be paying for that,
I agree.
because
I agree.
they'll value it more if they're having to, spend some of their own money on it as well. So, I am pleased to say that a lot of the stuff I do around digital accessibility is paid, but the likes of
Good.
the ambassadorship for Ewan's Guide, it's a voluntary role, so I just give
Right.
up my time where and when I can, because Ewan's Guide operate as a charity in this country.
Yeah. So I think that's
I
really
agree.
interesting.
And
Can I
go ahead,
follow on
Ian.
this one, Deborah, while it stays in my head? Because I was I'd put something out similar on Twitter not that long ago about people not value what they don't pay for, and I got this picked up on by a number of academics who really took issue with this as a sort of a philosophical argument that this shouldn't be the case, and so they were arguing, well, it's up to you, of course, if you want to get paid, but I reserve the right to give my my advice for free, and by you insisting on getting paid, you're restricting people and blah blah blah.
Wow.
I think that they're living in a dream world.
Yeah.
Because actually, yes, and the sort of they took the philosophical stance that if those people don't really see the value in the work that we're doing, it just that's their loss. And I'm thinking, well, actually, no, this is society's loss. And taking a philosophical stance on this rather than a pragmatic one based upon the realities of how business operates, and to a certain extent, the cynicism with which sometimes this operates, is actually going to be deleterious to us as a community, because we're going backwards, and we're always going to be having to then follow the kind of charitable model around this space.
Yeah.
I'Whereas actually, this is expertise. This is absolutely what people deserve to get paid for. So I've said my piece, and I'll let you carry on with your follow-up.
No, and I think that's a really good point. And Antonio said in our little chat window that, the academics are getting paid. And that's the point that I always bring up too. People want you to work for free, but it's interesting, they're always getting paid, so the academics are like, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. And yet you're getting paid. So it's okay for you to get paid, but it's not okay for me to get paid, especially because, I'm doing charitable work to help people with disabilities. No, stop it. It's not about charity. It's about inclusion for everybody, and the work that you do to include people with disabilities makes it more inclusive to all of us. Anyway, sorry.
I think
it's ridiculous. Go ahead.
I think we can even look at things in the other way around. Let's say if you are, you should get paid because you are doing valuable work to other people who don't have the same level of access to things. So you should pay for that. Everything else should be done for free. So we can counter the argument. Okay. In fact, the only thing that should be paid is when you are actually making the web more inclusive. Everything else should be done for free. It's just it's basically a nonsense argument.
No, I completely agree with that. I think that, if it was any other line of work, if you were a business consultant, if you were an education consultant, you would of course be getting paid for the work that you're doing. So I mean, this is just another line of work, just like anything else. So like, and it's sort of specialist knowledge that you're passing on to these people as well. So you should, I truly 100% believe that you should be paid for this work. Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, Antonio, it's a non-argument completely.
But isn't philosophy full of that? Anyway, I'm going to get myself into another philosophical argument with a professor of philosophy, and it's the last thing I need. So, Jonathan, I also know that you're a big fan of technology. So,
Yeah.
and that's a topic you like discussing. So, what are the technologies that you're using right now, and also what are the things that excite you?
I'm excited very much from where technology is now compared to where it was, say, 5-10 years ago, and you know, for the future of technology as well. Being blind, you know, obviously tech is a huge part of my life. You know, I'm like everybody else. My iPhone is like a lifesaver to me, not in terms of communication, but also in terms of some of the great apps that I use on a daily basis, such as CNAI, which is an absolutely fantastic free app by Microsoft. I use that every day for various things, you know, reading the food labels that are for the items that are in my fridge, and just for everyday things like that. Another app that I use when I'm out and about is the Neatbox Welcome app, which I believe you've had Gavin on here before, talking about his work, and I'm a big fan of that. But in terms of sort of more practical stuff, I also have like a braille display that I connect to my phone. So when say I'm out on public transport and I don't want everybody to hear what my screen reader's reading out to me when I'm on the bus or a train or whatever, I can connect my braille display and read it without the speech turned on. So I can read all my text and reply to texts through my braille display and that, which is just a little Bluetooth device about the same size as a miniature keyboard. And obviously, you know, I use the wearables like the Apple Watch and everything to quickly check any messages that come through without having to take my phone out of my pocket and that, because obviously when you're out and about, it's not always practical to be holding a phone in your hand, especially when you're trying to navigate busy cities and that. So, in terms of where technology is going, I'm very excited by the AI and how we're already starting to see it now, how AI is starting to be integrated into everyday life, and I think people just, you know, aren't aware of it, but it's happening. And I think in terms of accessibility, I think AI has huge potential in terms of, you know, captioning, in terms of advanced screen readers. You might not need to use as many keystrokes on the keyboards to navigate a screen reader, because I know that Apple's already introduced it with their latest iOS and macOS updates with the voice control. So I've been sort of testing that out recently, and because I use VoiceOver on my MacBook, and with this new voice control feature, I don't actually need to use much of the keyboard. You just say tap whatever, and it opens certain folders or opens the menu bar. So, and I think we're going. I think in technology, I think we're heading towards a sort of hands-free voice control environment, if you will. Yeah.
That's very interesting, and one of the areas that I've been working in for a long time, 2 decades, is around speech and speech recognition and so on.
Yeah.
One of the areas that I struggle with is working memory. So when you're being presented with choices through voice menus, that actually puts quite a strain on your working memory. So I
Yes.
think that there is still quite a lot of work to be done on how we're going to be able to present these choices to people in a way that don't become confusing. Because when you have a menu that is presented digitally rather than so I get the visual information, and you could get it by arrowing down using your keyboard or whatever. You can go backwards and forwards. It becomes very difficult to go backwards and forwards in a conversational dialogue. So there needs to be a whole new way of thinking about how we design systems so that they become more intuitive, less reliant on your working memory, and give you a way of essentially sort of saying what it is you want, and rather than being given 53 different choices, and by the time you've got to the sixth or seventh one, you've forgotten what the first one is. I'm sure you'll be familiar with all of the sort of terrible phone menu systems that we all use.
Absolutely. Like, so in terms of, if you take your iPhone, for instance, you open the settings and there's, like about 100 different settings. And especially when you're using a screen reader, you're flicking through each one of them, and then you think, oh, maybe it's not that one, so I've got to scroll back again. And I think that goes down to, like you were talking about, like digital design. I think everything is still, and it probably will continue to be for a wee while, designed to be seen. Everything's designed to be visual, and I think perhaps there needs to be some sort of thought around, like, maybe taking away from the visual aspect and making it more inclusive for everybody from the beginning. Because at the moment we're designing phones, laptops, apps even to be visual first, and then we're adapting them for screen readers. Screen readers are like, oh, we need to make this accessible for screen readers as well. So, I know exactly what you mean. Are just full of text and really quite difficult to navigate. So yeah, I do think it's a difficult.
Have we lost you?
Then I think we can absolutely.
Jonathan, you're cutting in and out, so we just recently we missed part of what you said. I don't know if you don't mind repeating just the last few sentences.
Yeah, no, I was just picking up on Neil's point about how like the menu systems are obviously designed to be visual, and I think in the future, even beginning now, we need to get people around the table to say, how can we design digitally to be inclusive from everyone from the start, rather than having to adapt everything for a screen reader. Because at the moment everything is designed to be visual first, and then say, how can we adapt this to make screen reader users be able to use this as well, not taking into account that the people who designed it probably aren't screen reader users themselves. So they probably don't see a problem with having a menu with about 50 different items on it. But when you're a screen reader user, that's too much auditory information to take in, and people's memories just aren't at that capacity.
Just taking the word future from one of your phrases, what type of technologies and things that we have experienced or have read about that you realize, okay, there's a huge potential here in order to make things more inclusive? Is there something that is really calling your attention?
I think I'm quite excited by what the prospects of AI and machine learning, and I think if you read a lot of the sort of technology business news, you see that a lot of the small AI startups are actually getting bought out by the bigger companies at the moment, like Apple, Facebook, Microsoft. They're all buying these small AI startups. So I think there's something sort of big in the upcoming future for sure around that. But again, I think it's all great and all that this is, the sort of future that we're heading towards, a sort of technological based future, but we do need to ensure that, disabled people aren't left behind again, and it's not just, we're moving on to the next chapter, but not bringing the disabled people with us. So I think it excites me that there's more disabled people who are reliant on technology, who can, say to these people who are designing these things, this is what we need to include in this tech. And I've through online and through my daily life, I've met more and more disabled people who are relying on tech. I mean, I've got friends who work in tech. I've met friends through online, like I said, who all rely on tech. And I think going forwards, I think these sort of companies who are designing this future technology, and especially these sort of AI companies, have to see that there's a marketplace for, making for digital inclusion.
I agree. I think that's very well said. And I worry about, I worry about a lot of things, which is why part of my hair is gray. But but I worry about the lack of data, good solid data. For people with disabilities and other minority groups, and I worry about the data that we already have, that we're teaching artificial intelligence with the machine learning, the deep learning, all that stuff. That data is biased. I was reading a book about a great book on artificial intelligence, and it was Life 3.0, and they were talking about Robo. They talked about a lot of great stuff, but one that caught my attention was on Robo Judges, and that the cool stuff about the future of artificial intelligent judges are that we can try all the cases very, very quickly instead of having you wait for your court date 7 months down the road. But just because our court system in the United States, for example, is very backlogged, and people just stay under stress as they're walking this path and blah, blah, blah. And they're talking about the benefits, and quite a few benefits, but they were also very concerned about the risks associated, including these machines being able to look at all of our, for example, once again, looking at the U.S. lens, all of our case law that we have. So it's like real easy. You'll do it, you'll figure it all out. You have all this wonderful case law, and then boom, I can tell you whether or not you're guilty or innocent very quickly, very efficiently. But what happens if we have hundreds and hundreds of years of case law that is actually biased? Because we know that in the United States we put, people of color in jail more often than, so we've got some real problems with our case law, and I am concerned about that. So I agree with what you're saying. How do you make sure that our community is engaged and really speaking for themselves? Because if we're not careful, we are going to be left further behind.
No, and I completely agree with that. And I think we're starting to see this now, but I think probably one of the most valuable things they have, because the things that companies can do with that data, selling it on, and it's an unregulated market at the moment, so there's no sort of rules around it. And particularly, you're talking about AI being able to examine hundreds of years of case law, and it would be able to do that in just an instant like that, where it would take humans and lawyers, decades to read through it and make a decision. The AI is going to be able to just snap its fingers and make a decision like that. I do think AI has huge potential, but there's also that risk factor as well. And I think in terms of using it in our everyday, especially using it in a law enforcement way and making decisions whether somebody, ends up being imprisoned or not because of it, I think, companies can program their own bias into it, and I think that's where it gets quite dangerous, So I'm never one who's really sort of strong for regulation in that, but I do think when it comes to AI, I think we're at the point where you sort of need to regulate what's possible now, before it gets out of hand, rather, be proactive rather than reactive.
I think that's absolutely right. We need some kind of ethical frameworks around this, and what we've seen so far with some of the large companies is that they've tried to self-governance, some with greater success than others. We've witnessed Google/Alphabet's governance around AI pretty much disintegrate. And not be replaced. So I think there is a vacuum here that needs to be filled fairly rapidly. I think that certainly within Europe, there's a taste for some of this and a taste for regulation. We'll see what happens with new appointments to the European Commission shortly. We have a bit of interest there because our former CEO and chairman has just stepped down. Because he's been nominated for the European Commission for France. Expect there to be some keen interest in tech as a result of that. So I think that we do need this kind of these ethical frameworks. There needs to be some kind of supranational body looking at this, and outside of company. Yes, every company should have their own ethical governance frameworks within them, but equally there needs to be some kind of level playing field for some of this stuff, because without it, and to a certain extent the genie's out of the bottle already, but without it, I think that the technology is developing so fast that we're it's not in the case of whether or not we can do this stuff now. It's really whether or not we should, and therefore we can't leave this to the developers, because the developers are going to just test the bounds of what they can do. They're not thinking necessarily about what they should do or some of the implications around it. Now, I think longer term we probably need to be embedding ethics into the processes and the development processes into the training of developers, but that's going to take years, and so in the shorter term there needs to be some kind of framework.
I completely agree with that. I think we would hope that all companies would have some sort of ethical policy when it comes to using unregulated technology, but the reality is that they're going to push the boundaries, and if one company sees another company pushing the boundaries, then they're going to see if they can take it a step further, and that's when it all starts to, I think, get a bit out of hand. So there needs to be some sort of framework in place, probably I would say now, to sort of mitigate any potential damage caused by this technology, because that's when there's a huge public outcry, and nobody wants that.
Because when you talk about these topics, we often see developers really excited about something new that they develop, the way how it connects the elements of data, the way how is able to automate pieces of it, but in the end, on the back of that, there's a database. And sometimes they have no knowledge about how that database was collected, how reliable that database is, what elements are missing from that database. And that database is in fact what is going to generate all the outputs from what they are creating. And it's fair for them that they say, oh, we don't have to know about that, but now they need to know more about that. It's not enough to develop a system and automate without considering the back end of those systems and how good they are. Otherwise, people might end up just feeding up systems with let's say with junk food or junk data, and that's not good enough because someone is going to suffer in one way or another, or someone is going to make bad decisions in the long term. Even on the initial phase, everyone might look excited by what is being done and about the technology look. So sometimes it's important for us to reflect on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think having a good front end. I mean, developers. I just this year I've sort of started dabbling in a bit of sort of programming and learning about programming language myself. And I know from a developer's mindset that they think about what the front end's going to look like. That's what it is. But I think Antonio, you're absolutely right. We need to take more consideration about the data being collected and how that's stored in the back end, and because otherwise, if you just keep feeding the system with loads of junk information, that's when it all goes wrong. I think from a developer's point of view, I think probably not enough developers to take that into consideration and start focusing on.
I think it's also really important, and I agree with what you said, Jonathan, and that we need to have policies, and Neil's talked about it as well, but I think we need to have ongoing analysis to make sure that, because I'm a former programmer. I programmed for years. I have not done it in many, many years since then. But you learn so much being a programmer. You learn so much about technology, or at least I did. So, but it's I would never consciously try to leave anybody out, and so a lot of it is unconscious bias. But there are people that might be tempted to deliberately leave some people out depending upon who they are and everything. And so companies or organizations are going to have quality assurance on these ethics. It can't just be a one-time policy. Our policy is that you need to be ethical. It's got to be an ongoing looking at it, really digging in the data. And once again, I've been doing a lot of research on artificial intelligence, and they were using this Robo Judge example. They were saying, could you at some point maybe you want to appeal to a human being as opposed to AI. It's just what we have to think about as society now. Everything is changing, and if we're not deliberate and conscious and really on top of it, people that have been disenfranchised in the past will get more disenfranchised, and we just can't do it. And Antonio put in the window something brilliant: multidisciplinary approach, and I totally agree with that. So let me turn it back over to you, Jonathan, and I know Neil's ready to.
Yeah, no, I do think that we need to have evaluation of it as well. You need some sort of oversight of what's happening. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with that 100%.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us today, Jonathan. I need to make sure that we're thanking the people that keep us fed and watered and supported over the recent years. So our big thanks go to Barclays Access and to Microlink and to MyClearText for providing the quality captions. Thank you also for being part of our community and joining us today. We look forward to you joining us on Twitter.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. I've had a great time chatting to you all. It's been It's been really interesting. So, no, thank you very much.
You did a
Our
great
pleasure.
job, Jonathan.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
No, I've really enjoyed it. It's been great.